So, my topic today is calming the storm. And I was reminded this week of that story from the Gospel of Mark about Jesus with the disciples, that Jesus had been teaching all day and he asked his disciples to take him to the other side, and meaning another location. So they got in the boat and they were on their way, and Jesus went to the corner of the boat and went to sleep. And in the meantime, a great storm came up, and the boat was rocking and rolling, and the disciples were terribly afraid. And they woke him up and they said, Master, there's this terrible storm. What should we do? And he got up and he calmed the storm immediately. And then he asked them, where is your faith? Did you forget? Where is your faith? And so, if we look at the mystical interpretation of this story, that Jesus represents our consciousness, Jesus represents that part of us that is one with the creative presence, and that it is often asleep. Do you remember the picture from the teaching from the coach to everywhere, where the passenger, the spirit is asleep in the back seat? That oftentimes that part of us is asleep. And so it's us, because all of the stories in the Bible are about us individually. And so the story represents us and our consciousness, that in that consciousness, when we are in turmoil, it's time to wake up that part of us and say, what do I need to know? What is the highest truth? And as Jesus just put out his hand and calmed the storm, that we put out our hand of spiritual practice. And I'll get into spiritual practice in a minute. But I want to talk more about the storm. What is the storm that we are in? We are in a great storm right now. And the storm is simply not having awareness of our emotions. That what happens is that we have emotions. Emotions are with us 24 hours a day, but we have very little awareness of them. In her book, Atlas of the Heart, Brene Brown wrote this book, which is a beautiful book all about emotions, because she said people only know three emotions: happy, sad, angry. And the rest of them, they can't even put a name to. And when we can't put a name to our emotions, that they just stir within us like a storm, that they are tumultuous inside and we can't identify. So our practice is to be aware of these emotions, to be aware of how they function in us. And as we do that, we're able to take the reins of them, that they are not pulling us into every other direction or taking us off course, but that we have dominion over them, that we can identify them and name them. And spiritual principle says what you name, you can change. And so once we name them, we can identify them, begin to work with them, and begin to release them. So it's always easy to do what we feel like doing, right? I feel like eating a bag of chocolate chip cookies. However, many of the things we feel like doing are either illegal, immoral, or socially unacceptable, or self-defeating, like the chocolate chip cookies. So we have to be aware of our emotions and what is pulling us, what is driving us. Is it our emotions? Is it our connection with the divine? It's a constant awareness. There's only one thing to practice, and it's our awareness all the time. Am I in fear or am I in faith? And what emotion is driving me? What emotion am I living with at the moment? So if we are uninformed and we just go along with our emotions, they can lead us down the wrong path. Without discipline, they can take us into something that is some variation of abuse of money, sex, or drugs. But the key to being happy, healthy, and prosperous is to have the capacity to understand how we're feeling at the moment. And this is done by understanding our emotional nature. And emotion is simply life information. Emotion is energy in motion or life information. And so it's an emotion is giving us information that there's a thought I'm thinking or a belief I'm holding, something that's going on with me that's causing this emotion to be so immense. Now, when we practice meditation and prayer, we bring ourselves, meditation especially, we bring ourselves into awareness of what we're thinking. We become aware of our thoughts. We're not attached to them or driven by them, but we are aware of our thinking. So a feeling, when we have a feeling is simply an awareness of the nature of the emotion. And so emotions that create good experiences in our lives cause us to feel good. And good feelings like love, joy, peace are forms of inspiration. And inspiration is that divinity within us, right? But emotions that cause difficulty in our lives cause us to feel bad. And we have feelings such as anger, sorrow, fear. They can be forms of suffering because they're based on what we are believing at the time. So our realization is to understand what we're really feeling, paying attention to that. And so we also pay attention to the moods that we're in, that we can, have you ever been in a mood? We can get into a mood in life. Now, when we're in inspiration, that's when we're drawing spirit in. And that can be where we're lifted up, that we're in the flow of life. We're in the divine flow and we feel it. We're in that connected presence. And so inspiration is that we feel that upliftedness. It's a place of joy. But fear is actually a frozen emotion. When we're in fear, it becomes stress in our flesh and it inhibits our body, our physical movements and our bodies. Have you ever been so frightened you've been frozen that you don't know what to do? That's a mood of survival when we are just frozen, we don't know what to do. And every fear is a survival strategy. So we have these strategies connected with our fears. But what we know from our teaching is that there is one true antidote for fear, and that is love. And in the Gospel of John, he says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out all fear. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out all fear. And so when we're afraid, there's all these strategies going on and all these responses that we have. Because when we're afraid, there's a sense of separation. So there's an evolutionary, Reverend Lloyd Strom says there's an evolutionary journey that our fear takes. And so the first one that happens when we have a fear is we react by hiding. that the lowest level is we react by hiding. When we have fear, we hide. The second one, because after we've developed courage, we suppress our fears. And then the second one is now we have the desire to harm. We go from hiding to harm. Now we want to retaliate. We're on the defense. Then when we move from hiding to harm, oftentimes we want to have something that's going to solve the problem or help us. So remember, during the pandemic, we were afraid. In essence, we were hiding in our houses. Some people lashed out because they didn't know what else to do. That fear was so great. And that we wanted to have something, and everybody wanted the vaccine. We had to have the vaccine, that this is the thing we want to have. And then from having, we moved to hoarding. And do you remember? We'll always associate toilet paper with the pandemic, right? Because we were hoarding toilet paper. We were hoarding things that we could hoard because thinking it would protect us. When we know that's that outward protection. And when we're afraid, that's what we're looking for, is the outward protection. So we move from hide, harm, have, hoard. But when we infuse love, we shift fear from that place of moving from the desire to possess something into being inspired to express something. And so when we bring fear, or when we bring love into that fear, we move to a place of help. And certainly in the pandemic, we saw so many people that were ready and willing to help others that could not help themselves. So as long as we have this essence of fear, we can't really solve it. We have to understand it and put it into perspective so we can understand it better, and we can work to dispel our fears. We can dispel our fears by turning them into inspirations. And so in the meditation, I asked you to identify what is a place of concern, a place of trouble, a place of worry. And then that beautiful meditation from Ernest Holmes that takes us into that recognition that be still and know that I am God. I am the principle of peace, remembering that we have that within us. I rest in calm trust and rely on the law of spirit to bring good into my experience of life. So we can hold this situation or these fears and bring love into it, bring inspiration, bring prayer into it, and bring peace. And then that beautiful song from Karen Drucker. Now, when we have sorrow, sorrow is actually the desire to hide inside ourselves from the world we fear. Sorrow is a way of withdrawing sometimes from life. And so when we're not sure what to do, or we're at a loss and we feel loss, we have sorrow and it brings us within. We withdraw from it. But very often in sorrow, it leaves us with feelings of guilt or remorse or regret. And so it's having to be able to understand that and have an awareness of that we can make that shift. So when we're able to bring inspiration in at any point in our lives, and inspiration can be prayer, meditation, spiritual readings, song and music, poetry, body movement like Tai Chi or Qigong, that we're bringing inspiration into our movement. So we're shifting the energy. we're shifting that. Because inspiration is about the constant flow of life, that there's a flow. I am still, be know that I am in the flow. I am unhurried and unworried. I am in the flow of life. So that when we have that, it's effortless. We're in the flow and we're in that state of inspiration. But when we're in fear, is we have encountered a condition that threatens us in some way, causes separation or threatens us, which is what's happening in the world, that there's a lot of feeling threatened right now. There's a lot of fear. And when we look at fear, when you stop to look at fear, almost everything has its basis in fear. It's shocking when you look at it. Advertising has its basis in fear. Fear that you will get an illness, fear that you will not smell good to everyone else, fear that your home will be invaded by insects, fear that all these fears we are manipulated into being afraid, into purchasing. Even on the home shopping channel, they'll say, there's only 200 items left of this item, which is fear of, I better get it before everybody else gets it and I won't have this item. We have fear in the news. So the news is this much information and surrounded with, very often, not all of it, very often surrounded with fear. And the fear is that we will tune in again. Tune in later to find out what happens next or what you can do. Because the news is owned by someone who makes money. Advertising is for someone that's making money. There's nothing wrong with making money, but let's do it out of love and not out of fear. Politics is all about fear and separation. So our awareness is to be aware of these things. And how am I operating? Am I operating out of love or am I operating out of fear? Paul Selig says, you are free at a moment's notice to give up an attachment to a negative frequency day or night. You are free to give that up at any time. You are free to be free from fear. That the freedom, true freedom, is the absence of fear. And fear, the only purpose of fear is to create more fear. So when we know that, we can begin to surround it, put light around it, and know that I can see this differently. Ernest Holmes says, we are not going through a harder time today, a longer or darker night than has ever been experienced before. It only seems darker because we have lost faith, the beacon of light. And isn't that what Jesus said to the disciples? Have you lost your faith? Because faith is the inspiration. Faith is that place of, I know that I am one with that divine flow, and I am one, and what do I need to do to get me back in the flow? I'm always in the flow, but somehow I've forgotten, or I've stepped out of it, or there's a block. Because the flow is constant, but we have the block when we set up a fear, when we set up separation, when we set up anger and frustration. Those are our blocks. They're blocking the flow. So when I can release that, when I can dispel that through my practice, then I'm back in the flow. I am in the flow of life, unhurried and unworried. I am in the flow. And so the underlying mental cause of fear is doubt, right? We doubt that this is working. We doubt that this is enough. Have you ever prayed your prayer, your beautiful 5-step spiritual prayer, and then released it, and so it is, and then wonder, how's it going to get here? Where's it going to come from? That's doubt. Doubt steps in, and it puts separation from the flow. So the solution is, again, it's faith, and it's that intuition with truth. It's coming into that connection with truth, coming into that connection with love. When we can stay in that state of love, we stay in that state of harmony, we stay in the flow, and we can transmute, transcend any challenge that's in our way. So our practices of to keep us aware, to keep us in awareness, to keep us centered, to keep us in the flow. And again, whether it's prayer, meditation, music, readings, movement, that whatever we use, whatever is your practice, it has to be a daily dedicated place to go to set the tone for the day, to set the tone of inspiration, to set the tone of a vibration of love. When we're in that vibration of love, we stay in that connected presence. So remember, the vibration is that we're always in the vibration with the oneness that is the creative presence. But depending on what we're thinking and experiencing at the time, that emits our frequency. So we want our vibration to stay high, our frequency to be love. So our practice is to pay attention to what's going on inside. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's going on with me in this moment? This is the key this is why we're here, to know this, to experience this, because the more we are in that awareness, the more we are in that vibration of love, we are sending that love around the planet. That when I'm in that vibration of love, I send that out to the people around me. I send that out to whoever comes into my presence. And they feel that love, and they're lifted up in love. And imagine that as we do this, we are lifting and changing the frequency of the planet. Because the more of us doing this together, that we are lifting and changing this frequency. And this is the thing that's going to change the direction of where we're going. It's that love is that presence and power and where it takes us. Peace is the absence of awareness of suffering. When we have peace, there is an awareness of love that comes into our body mind, and we feel that place of peace. Peace is experienced when love is present in our minds. So when we're in that place of love, we're in that place of peace. And then, as I talked about last week, that place, then we move into that place of joy, where joy is an awareness of abundance of life flowing through us, that we recognize that there's a divine flow and it's moving through me, and there's no obstruction, and I feel joy, I feel inspired, I feel uplifted. And gratitude is another practice of how we get to stay there. Gratitude is that we experience thankfulness, recognizing what we're receiving, recognizing what's going on with us, and being grateful for that presence. And so pay attention this week when you are called into that place of fear. Pay attention to where the fear is, and pay attention to where your faith is. And use that faith, because you have the ability. You and I are the only ones that have the ability to change that channel, to change that frequency, to change that radio dial, however you want to say it. We just shift it to one of inspiration instead of desperation. And we shift and we increase that flow and allow that flow. And when we're in a place of gratitude, if you are ever needing immediate shift in energy, stop what you're doing and start identifying gratitude for the things around you. And you will realize the shift and the difference. And so pay attention this week and remember to bring your practice. It's that daily dedicated practice that keeps us in that place of inspiration. So let's take all of this into prayer. And take another breath. Because the breath is that reminder of that eternal flow of life that is moving in and through and as us. The breath is that reception and release. It is always present. How grateful I am for this breath of life, for this breath of awareness, for this breath of love. And so what I know and recognize is that right where I am is love and light and peace. And that I bring this into my awareness right now, knowing that love is the elixir that transforms, transcends, that illumines and lifts up any situation in life. And in that awareness of love, I awaken to that this day. And I know each of us is awakened to that profound sense of love, of light, of peace. And that peace moves into our heart, expanding and pulsating, illuminating. That anytime we need to remember, anytime we're in that place of fear or doubt, that we bring in that memory of the heart, of the essence of love as a light, as a flame, as a presence that is illuminating any place of darkness, that is transcending any place of fear. And so how grateful I am for this knowingness, for this experience, for this teaching, for this awareness that love is all there is, and that each of us is that expression of love in the world. How grateful I am for all of these gifts, all of this knowingness, all of this goodness. I am so grateful for this lesson today and for each of us here, knowing that we are lifted in love and transformed by peace and grace. And so I release this word with deep gratitude for all of this and for so much more. And so it is. Thank you so much. Blessings.